I used to think if I worked hard enough, people would notice. That if I smiled wide, held the door, got straight A's, and stayed out of trouble, the universe would reward me. That's what all the books said. What teachers told us. That's what my mom always preached to me. But they don't tell you what happens when your hard work doesn't fit into someone else's favorite story. My name is Erin. 17. Class of 2024. Born and raised in a small suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. I'd been valedictorian since freshman year, captain of the debate team, founder of the book club, and the only student in school history to get a perfect SAT score. I was the one teachers pointed to when they wanted to inspire the underclassmen. Be like Erin, they'd say. She's going places. I had a dream. Columbia University. Journalism major. I wanted to be the voice for people who never got to speak. Maybe write for the New York Times, maybe run my own podcast. I didn't just want success, I wanted meaning. At home, it was different. My parents were polite people, the kind that hosted barbecues and knew everyone's birthday. But inside those walls, I was more of a silent workhorse than a daughter. They weren't cruel. Just absent in the ways that mattered. Every chore was mine. Every high grade was expected, not celebrated. If I brought home a B+, my mom would purse her lips and ask, "What happened?" Meanwhile, my younger sister Riley could get a C in Intro to Painting and still get a "Great job, sweetie." And ice cream after. Riley. 15. TikTok famous for lip-syncing and mediocre makeup tutorials. She was the kind of pretty that got her free drinks and fast boyfriends. I don't blame her, she played her role well. She was the fun one. I was the responsible one. But I didn't mind. Not really. I had my eyes on something bigger. I'd spent months researching scholarships, crafting essays, building the perfect application. I worked weekends at the local coffee shop to save up for application fees. I stayed up past midnight most nights editing my personal statement, fine-tuning it word by word. Then, in March, the letter came. I stood in the hallway holding the envelope like it was some fragile thing. My hands shook as I opened it, reading the bold black letters. Congratulations, Erin. We are pleased to offer you admission to Columbia University. I screamed. For the first time in my life, I screamed so loud I didn't care who heard me. I danced in the living room. I cried. I ran into the kitchen where my parents were watching some show about real estate. I got in, I said, holding the letter like a trophy. Columbia. I got in. They blinked at me like I just told them the coffee machine broke. That's nice, my dad said, muted the TV. How much is tuition? I hesitated. It's expensive, but I'm applying for aid and I got a merit scholarship. It covers part of it, but I'll need help with the rest. Just for the first semester. I can work after that. My mom cut me off. Erin, we've talked about this. No. We hadn't. We can't afford college like that, she continued, shaking her head. Not a school in New York. Out-of-state tuition is insane. You should consider OSU, or maybe community college. Close to home. I got into Columbia, I repeated, this time quieter, like maybe they hadn't heard me right the first time. But they had. And they didn't care. We're not taking out loans for this, my dad added. You're almost an adult. You want this so bad, figure it out. Work study. Loans. Scholarships. That's how life works. Something in my chest cracked a little. I stood there, letter still in hand, the ink almost mocking me now. I had done everything right. Everything. I didn't argue. I just nodded, walked back to my room, and closed the door. I stared at the acceptance letter on my bed until the words blurred. That night, Riley posted a video of herself doing some dance in her new outfit, a $300 designer top my mom had just ordered for her. In the caption, "NYC, here I come." I thought it was a joke. The next morning, I found the travel itinerary in the printer tray, a 3-week, immersive art camp in Florence, Italy, fully paid. Flights. Housing. Tuition. All of it. For Riley. I was still eating leftovers from 3 nights ago. I didn't say a word. I just walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and smiled like my whole world hadn't just fractured. I told myself it was fine. That I would figure it out. That I didn't need anyone to save me. But in the quiet, when no one was watching, I'd stare at that acceptance letter and wonder. What more did they want from me? And why wasn't I ever enough? I stopped mentioning college after that night. I stopped bringing up Columbia. I stopped checking my email for financial aid updates. I stopped dreaming. Instead, I quietly picked up extra shifts at the coffee shop and started scouring forums about private student loans. I'd never felt poor until that moment, not because we didn't have money, but because love suddenly felt like a currency I couldn't afford. That summer, the house filled with excitement, not for me, but for Riley's upcoming trip to Italy. She was a whirlwind of suitcases and shopping bags. She got a brand new passport, fresh highlights in her hair, and a limited edition iPhone, just in case she needed good pictures for her art portfolio. I watched her pack while sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. "You excited?" I asked. She barely looked up. "Obviously." I nodded. "Must be nice." She turned to me, annoyed. "What's your problem?" I shook my head. "Nothing." Because really, what could I say? That I was swallowing jealousy like acid. That I wanted to scream at her, at our parents, at the world. That it was getting harder to smile when I felt invisible in my own home. She left with hugs, kisses, and a full suitcase. I stayed behind and took the bus to work. One afternoon, I got home and found an envelope on the kitchen table. My name was written on it in my mom's cursive. I opened it, hopeful for a second. Maybe they changed their minds, maybe it was something for college, anything. Inside was a brochure. Local community colleges, affordable options near you. I laughed. I laughed until it hurt. That night, I found the bank app open on my mom's laptop. She'd left it running. I didn't mean to snoop, at least, not at first, but then I saw the transactions. $4,200, Tuscany Arts Academy. $1,800, boutique hotel booking. $950, Fashion Direct NYC. $800, Apple Store. $75, Sephora. $0, Erin. That was the first time I realized this wasn't about money. It never was. They had money. They just didn't want to spend it on me. And that hurt more than any rejection letter ever could. I started keeping a secret folder on my laptop, screenshots of receipts, quotes from conversations, even pictures of gifts Riley got. I didn't know why I was doing it, but something inside me said, this isn't fair. Someday, someone needs to see this. One night, while doing laundry, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. "She's so stubborn," my mom whispered. "If she just listened and took our advice." "She always acts like we owe her something," my dad replied. "We gave her food, a roof, what more does she want?" "Riley's so much easier to love," my mom sighed. "At least she appreciates what she gets." I stood in the hallway, laundry basket clutched so tightly my fingers went white. Easier to love. Those words. They gutted me. The next day, I returned to work with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I started skipping dinner. Not because I wanted to, but because it felt easier to not be present. I buried myself in work, applications, grants, anything that made me feel like I was moving, somewhere. But at night, when the house was quiet and I was alone in my room, I'd reread the Columbia letter until the paper was soft from fingerprints. I stopped telling people I got in. Stopped correcting them when they assumed I was heading to state school. Because how do you explain that you earned your dream but weren't allowed to chase it? One evening, Grandma called. She was on speaker, asking about Riley's trip. My mom beamed. Oh, she's having a blast. Sent us pictures of the Uffizi today. She's so cultured, you know. And Erin? Grandma asked. What's she up to? There was silence. She's figuring things out, my dad said vaguely. Taking time to explore her options. I sat 3 feet away in the living room. They couldn't even say my name with pride. That's when I started to break. Not all at once. But piece by piece. I stopped talking at dinner. Stopped showing them my pay stubs. I became a ghost in my own life, still moving, still breathing, but fading. I started to wonder, if I disappeared, would they even notice? Then something happened. Something small. But it changed everything. One evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and there he was. Tall, silver-haired, and stern as always. Grandpa. He looked me over and raised an eyebrow. You look thin. I smiled weakly. I'm fine. He nodded and walked inside, handing me a bag of groceries without saying a word. He always showed love in action, not words. We sat on the porch that night, just the two of us. Fireflies danced in the grass. He pulled out a cigar but didn't light it, just held it like a habit he couldn't break. So, he said, how's college planning going? I hesitated. Then I lied. Oh, I'm thinking about OSU. Just trying to work a bit first. He looked at me. Just looked. And I swear, in that one glance, he saw everything. The silence between us stretched thin. He didn't press. Just gave a slow, thoughtful nod. But something told me he wasn't done. And I was right. Because Grandpa wasn't just visiting. He was watching. And the truth was about to come out, louder than I ever dared speak it. Grandpa stayed for 4 days. The house was different when he was around, quieter, heavier. My parents, who were usually smug and dismissive, suddenly turned into anxious teenagers around him. He didn't yell, didn't scold, he just had a way of looking at you that made you confess things you hadn't even done yet. He was retired military. Fought in 2 wars. Never remarried after Grandma died. Everyone called him old school, but I always thought he was just fair. Stern, but fair. He didn't speak unless it mattered. And when it mattered, his words were sharp enough to leave bruises. The second morning, I was making coffee when I noticed him standing by the kitchen window, arms crossed, watching my dad through the glass as he tinkered with the sprinklers. He's hiding something, Grandpa said, without turning. I almost dropped the mug. What do you mean? He finally looked at me, eyes narrowed. You've been quieter than usual. Paler. Your shoulders are tighter. I know what burden looks like. And that boy out there is whistling like someone who's hiding a corpse under the flower bed. I forced a laugh, but it cracked in the middle. I'm fine, Grandpa. He took the coffee from my hand and set it down gently. No, you're not. We stood there in silence, steam rising between us. Talk to me, he said. Please. I hesitated. Months of silence had trained me to swallow everything. But something about the way he asked, soft, but steady, unraveled me. So I told him. Not everything at once, but enough. About Columbia. About the rejection. About Riley's trip. The receipts. The brochure. The lies. All of it. He didn't say a word the whole time. When I finished, I looked down, ashamed. Ashamed of crying. Ashamed of needing him. Ashamed of hoping he would fix it. He finally spoke. They told me they couldn't afford your books last Christmas. I looked up. They asked me for $3,000, he continued. Said it was for your textbooks and testing fees. I wired it that same day. My blood ran cold. He walked to the dining table, pulled out his notebook, the one he always carried, and started flipping through pages filled with neat, cursive handwriting. Names, dates, amounts. He tapped a line with his pen. December 14th, $3,000. Aaron's college prep. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. He looked up. You never saw a dime of that, did you? I shook my head. His jaw clenched. And they used my money for art school in Italy. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. That evening, Grandpa called a family dinner. No one declined. No one dared. We sat around the table, the air so thick it felt like breathing through cotton. Riley was back by then, all tanned and smug, showing off photos of museums she didn't care about. Grandpa cut her off mid-sentence. Riley, can you excuse us for a few minutes? She blinked. What? Go upstairs, he said, calmly. This is grown-up talk. Riley scoffed but obeyed. He turned to my parents. You lied to me. My dad froze. My mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. You took money I gave for Aaron's future and spent it on your own selfish preferences. You lied. To me. To her. You created a child you ignored, and another you inflated like a balloon. Now one of them's deflated, and the other's about to pop. Dad, wait, my father started. No. You wait. Grandpa's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. I want to see your bank statements. Now. My mom paled. That's private. It's not, he said. Not when my trust money is involved. Silence. Then, slowly, they realized, he wasn't asking. He was telling. The next morning, he had the documents spread out on the kitchen table. Charges, transfers, receipts. He combed through them like a detective at a crime scene. Every highlight was a betrayal. Every line item, a wound. He didn't yell. Didn't curse. He just underlined and nodded and made quiet, thoughtful notes. That night, he handed me a folder. Inside were documents. Real ones. Bank letters. Trust disclosures. A tuition check already made out to Columbia University. I can't fix the last few years, he said. But I can fix the next 4. I cried. For the first time in front of him. He pulled me in, gently, the way he never did when I was younger. You're not broken, Aaron, he whispered. You're just unfinished. And they tried to write your ending too soon. The next day, he called a lawyer. He revoked my parents' power of attorney over any financial assets tied to his name. He rewrote his will. He ensured that everything going forward, trusts, inheritances, college funds, would bypass them entirely and go straight to me. And just like that, everything they built on favoritism and deceit began to crumble. My parents were stunned. Riley was furious. Me? I was finally free. But I also knew this was only the beginning. Because justice isn't a moment. It's a process. And mine had only just begun. The house felt colder after Grandpa's lawyer came by. Not physically, but in the way people stopped looking each other in the eyes. The way my parents started whispering behind closed doors. The way Riley slammed doors louder than usual. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was thick with resentment. My parents were stripped of their access to anything tied to Grandpa's name. Trust funds, real estate stakes, even the joint savings account Grandpa once set up, just in case. It was all legally rerouted. I overheard them fighting about it in the kitchen late at night. She turned him against us, my mother hissed. No, my father snapped back. You turned him against us when you used his money like a goddamn ATM. But she's his favorite now. That little Miss Perfect, she always knew how to play the victim. Victim. That word stayed with me for days. Was I? Maybe. But if I was, I wasn't passive. I wasn't weak. I was awake now, awake to every lie, every look, every time they chose silence over support. Riley, on the other hand, was spiraling. She was still trying to pretend nothing had changed. She flaunted her clothes, bragged about Italy, and talked about applying to a private art conservatory in Paris next. But her usual charm felt cracked, like a mirror reflecting desperation. She cornered me one afternoon. So you're really going to Colombia? She said, arms crossed. I nodded. She sneered. Must be nice. Having Grandpa wrapped around your finger. No, I said, my voice calm. It's nice being believed. For once. She scoffed. He only did this because he feels guilty for being absent our whole lives. No, I said again. He did this because he saw the truth. You just hate that it wasn't your version. She stared at me, jaw tight. And I saw it then, not hate, but fear. She was afraid. Not of me. But of losing the world she'd grown comfortable in, the world where her mediocrity was praised and paid for. The world where I played the quiet audience to her spotlight. That world was gone now. Grandpa had ripped the curtain down. A week later, he hosted a small dinner, just me, him, and a stack of manila folders. No fanfare. No speeches. Just facts. This, he said, handing me the first folder, is your full tuition covered. I've already spoken with Columbia's financial office. They've accepted the trust transfer. I stared at it, barely breathing. This, he said, tapping the second folder, is for your housing, books, and expenses. Managed by a third-party fiduciary. Not your parents. Ever. He paused before giving me the third. And this, he said, sliding it over, is a letter I want you to read when things feel heavy. I looked up, confused. A letter. From me, he said, a softness in his voice I rarely saw. For later. Not now. I nodded. I want you to remember, he continued, that you didn't earn this because of your pain. You earned it because you refused to let that pain change you. I tried to thank him, but the words lodged in my throat. He reached across the table and placed a hand over mine. They made you think you were unworthy, he said. But I see you, Aaron. I've always seen you. I just didn't know how invisible they made you feel. That night, I went back to my room and cried harder than I had in months. Not from grief. From release. The following weekend, Riley found out her application to the Paris art program was rejected. Without financial backing, she was scrambling. I overheard her on the phone begging a friend for a place to stay for the summer. My parents weren't doing well either. The bank had flagged their account for irregular transfers tied to Grandpa's trust. Their credit line was frozen pending investigation. The nice car. Leased under the joint trust's name. It was towed 2 days later. Mom started drinking more. Dad stopped making eye contact altogether. And me? I was packing. Columbia sent my welcome packet. Dorm assignment. Reading list. Orientation schedule. Every item felt like a rebirth. I packed slowly, deliberately, folding every piece of clothing with the care of someone building a new life one thread at a time. The morning I left, Grandpa drove me to the airport. We didn't say much on the way, he was never one for long goodbyes. But just before I walked into security, he pulled me into a hug. "You were never the problem," he said into my hair. "You were the proof." "The proof of what?" I whispered. "That love without fairness isn't love at all." I nodded, blinking back tears. As I walked away, I didn't look back. Not because I didn't care, but because I was finally walking towards something that was mine. Something earned. Something real. New York smelled like ambition. It wasn't always pleasant, the kind of ambition that clung to the subway rails and steamed off concrete in the middle of August, but it was alive. And for the first time in my life, I felt alive with it. Orientation week at Columbia was a blur. New faces, tall buildings, professors who spoke like their words carried weight. I stayed quiet at first, listening more than talking. Watching the girls in designer sneakers and the boys who casually dropped their SAT scores like weapons. I wasn't one of them. But I was here. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of traffic and the smell of burnt coffee from the dorm kitchen. And every morning, I remembered, I wasn't supposed to be here, not according to my parents. Not according to the silent vote they'd cast the day they chose Riley over me. But Grandpa had voted louder. He believed in me, not for what I had suffered, but for what I had survived. I printed out my acceptance letter and taped it inside my closet. A quiet reminder that I earned my place in this city, in this school, in this life. Midway through the semester, I got an email from Columbia's Dean of Undergraduate Studies. One of my essays had been selected for a campus publication. It was titled, "The Quiet Inheritance, What We Carry When No One Leaves Us Anything But Silence." It went viral among student forums. A few professors shared it. Some students came up to me after lectures, whispering, "That piece. I think you wrote about my mom." One night, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then I got a voicemail. It was my mother. "Hi, Erin. We saw your article. A friend sent it to us. I didn't know you felt that way. Maybe you could come home for Thanksgiving. We could talk." I deleted it. 2 days later, a text came from Riley. "Congrats, I guess. Still think you went too far. But whatever." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. They had shown me what their love was built on: conditions, favoritism, lies. And I had spent too long trying to renovate a foundation that was never solid to begin with. Now I was building something of my own. One brick of truth at a time. Grandpa and I talked every Sunday. He never asked for updates, just asked if I was sleeping, eating, breathing. He'd send small care packages, peanut butter crackers, handwritten notes, sometimes newspaper clippings about journalists he thought I'd admire. One Sunday, he said, "They're struggling, you know." "Who?" "Your parents. Riley too." I figured. He paused. "You know, Erin. Just because you forgive them one day doesn't mean you have to let them back in." I exhaled. "I don't know if I'm ready to forgive." "That's fine," he said. "Forgiveness isn't a race. It's a choice. And you don't owe anyone that choice." That conversation sat with me for weeks. And eventually, I opened the third folder, the one Grandpa had given me during that dinner, the one labeled simply "For later." Inside was a handwritten letter. "Erin. If you're reading this, It means you've taken your first steps into the world without looking back, and I want you to know how proud I am of you. You taught me something I should have known sooner, that being good isn't about staying quiet or obedient. It's about being honest. Even when it costs you everything. Even when no one claps for it. You are not broken. You are not difficult. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. And from this moment on, no one else gets to decide your worth, not even family. Go right loudly. Live boldly. And never, ever dim your light just to make someone else comfortable. I'll always be your loudest supporter. Grandpa. I folded it gently and tucked it into my journal. That night, I stood by my dorm window, looking out at a city that never slowed down, never apologized, never asked permission to shine. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was behind. I felt like I had arrived. Epilogue, 2 years later. I graduated with honors. Landed an internship at a media company that turned into a full-time reporting job. Moved into a tiny apartment with crooked floors and paper-thin walls that I adored like it was a palace. My work was published. My name was printed. People heard me now. Grandpa passed away peacefully during my final semester. He left me a note in his will: keep writing. They need your truth. And so, I did. My parents tried, once or twice, to reach out. Holidays. Birthdays. I wished them well. But I never went back. Some doors don't need slamming. Some just stay closed. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't anger. It's healing. And living a life they told you was impossible.